contest. So, or else you're just going to get a shirt designed by moi.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looks like we just lost. Oh, it's back. All right, so yeah, man. So we'll have some more stuff coming with that soon. We do not have the timestamps in the show notes this week. We are only going to talk about Star Wars and Star Wars only. We'll wrap up at the end, but yeah, we're just going to talk about Han Solo. We just came out of the movies an hour or so ago, and we're going to chat.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about the other piece of news first?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about our first piece of, our one and only piece of Star Wars news this week. Excuse me, and not to undercut it, we did have some SWTOR news, minor stuff, updates, stuff like that, but I'll come back with that info next week. So the big news that just dropped today was a Boba Fett movie is indeed in the works.
Officially.
And it is from Logan James Mangold.
Yeah, James Mangold, who
James
knocked
Mangold,
it out
sorry.
of the park with Logan,
Mhm.
is just the latest person to flip flop from Fox to Marvel, from Marvel to DC, whatever. It's all kind of going around, and it's fantastic. I mean, he was nominated for Best Director, I believe, this year.
Yeah.
And he's fantastic work. In the minute that Mangold was announced to me, I looked at you and I said, all right, if they did Boba Fett as a Western, it would be phenomenal.
Well, I mean, in the vein of, and that's why I think Logan worked so well. It was a X-Men Western. It was dark. It was gritty. It was awesome.
Everything that Boba Fett needs to be.
Exactly. So I think if they're going to go down this road, and I think I have a couple things to say about this when we talk about Solo, but there's a seedy, dark underworld that has always been present in the Star Wars universe that we got a decent look at this tonight, actually. So I'm pretty stoked to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts on this Boba Fett movie? I'm still not super excited, but I'm actually okay with this gentleman being in charge of it, to be fair.
Yeah, with Mangold being brought on, I'm definitely on board.
Yeah. And let's see here. I think that's it for that. So let's get to our big news. There's no news. We're going to talk about the movie, man. Let's talk about it.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was so much better. And I kind of went in. It's really funny because I had pretty low expectations for it almost all year and a half since it's been filming and everything like that. But then the review started coming out this week, and I haven't read anything.
Yeah,
but you see headlines.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see, like, it's not as bad as people were expecting. And so...
not only that, it actually might be good.
Exactly. But I still tried not to get my hopes up too much, and it surpassed everything.
Absolutely. And I think it helped maybe going in with moderate to low expectations, just like, all right, we'll see how this goes. I kind of did the same thing with Rogue One. I was excited for Rogue One, but at the same time, it was like, okay, let's see how these spin-off movies go. And I think I said this earlier tonight to you. I said, well, it was nice to see just events happening in the Star Wars universe that weren't just fully tied to this huge overarching story that had to do with the Skywalkers and all this other stuff. It was like, there's a seedy underground. There are organizations at work. People are fighting over things. There's a Kessel Run. Like, there are other things going on that is not just Skywalker and Vader and such.
Yeah, it really... What I think this movie did, that Rogue One did in the most part, but Rogue One was more heavily tied into the main storyline.
Yeah.
But what this one ultimately did was prove that standalone Star Wars stories can work.
They can. And they did, I think they did a pretty good job, honestly. I liked the casting choices I think were pretty damn good. To be fair, Alden Ehrenreich, I think, got the most flack going into it for not looking like Solo, and people were like, oh, or Harrison Ford, I should say.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you remember me last year, I kept saying he wasn't my number one choice.
Right.
And everyone was like, well, he doesn't have as deep a voice. He doesn't have the self-assured swagger. And I'm like, you got to remember, he's like 15 years younger here.
Right.
He's not supposed to have that yet. He's supposed to be much more brash and much more...
And you could see that development, that like, I just want to prove myself. I want to do this.
Exactly.
And you get that as from the older Han Solo, when you get him in episode 4 and beyond, you get that is the result of all of the stuff that he fought to become as a young man.
Right.
You know?
You definitely also see it in Donald Glover's Lando.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he really channeled Billy D really, really well.
He did a really good job.
Even the voice was pretty good. But when he gets caught off guard, and there's only a couple times in the movie he does,
right,
you really see the not, I don't want to say juvenile, but the naivete that's in there. Whereas like in Empire, when he has to backstab him for Vader, it's just a matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not something that breaks his heart.
Right. I mean, he owned the room. I mean,
yeah.
later in the film, as Billy D. But like now, he did own the room on the tables, but you could.
But where he wasn't self-assured, you could tell he was.
Yeah. Like on the ship, it was more like, okay, what are we doing, kind of thing. But like in the casinos, that's Billy D.
Exactly.
Or that Billy D. That's Lando.
Right.
Yeah. So that I really thought Ehrenreich did a good job.
Yes.
There were moments where he captured, I think, what a young Han Solo would have been. There was a couple looks towards the end, especially with Kira. I was telling you earlier. There's also just some lines and just the way that he approached the situation is just like, hey, I have a plan. Check this out. And then they cut away and they're like, what do you think he's talking about? And it's like, he's coming up with something crazy.
Exactly.
But he's also, which was a cool twist at the end, you really got to see what Han Solo was good at. Improvising, seeing all angles, and at the same time,
playing people off their own expectations.
Playing everybody, seeing the hand for what it was. Like, he played, although he lost to Lando in the first Sabacc game.
He learned from it.
He learned from it, and he realized, okay, if I'm going to beat people, I need to know them, and I need to know what they're going to do and predict what they might do if they do this, and see every aspect. And by the end of the film, you get to see what Han Solo is going to become later because of how good he was at reading the room and playing the game.
Yeah, and I mean, the most probably heavy-handed foreshadowing throughout the whole movie was the whole thing with Beckett, where at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie, they totally did a callback to it, where he said, you have to listen to me.
Yeah.
But then if you do listen to Beckett, even when he's not talking to Solo, throughout the whole movie, he's dropping little pearls of wisdom that you could see Solo picks up. And the most important one is when he and, he being Beckett, when Beckett and Chewbacca are playing hologram chess, he says, you've got to look a few moves ahead. And Han is walking by at this point.
Yeah.
And so he's he's not part of the conversation, but he's listening. He's listening to all these little things, and he ends up planning a few moves ahead.
Well, and had he not done that, he would have lost again.
Exactly.
And again, and this goes back to what we were kind of saying about Deadpool last week. This is an anti-hero story. Clearly, none of these people are heroes in the grand scheme of things, right? They're all after their own devices and trying to do, it's not about the greater good. It's about the job. It's about the money. It's about the next step, right? But what I think they did a really good job of with him is, just like with Deadpool, he lost stuff. He lost Kira in the beginning. That changed him. That spurred him to fight through, the Imperial Navy and everything else that he ended up doing, and that spurred him forward. And then he lost his mentor again when he walked away, and all this other stuff. I mean, I think that the loss and then being able to bounce back from that says a lot about what we see as Han Solo later, for sure.
Yeah, and we were talking about how it's connected to the rest of the series without being overly reliant on the saga.
Yeah.
And so let's just kind of go over through the major points that I think connected it.
Okay.
Let's talk about the big stuff first.
You notice we haven't spoiled anything yet.
Right.
Spoilers, by the way.
This stuff is definitely going to be spoilerific. So let's talk about the big stuff first. The Kessel Run.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Well, we can't really talk about the Kessel Run without talking about the Falcon.
Yes.
So let's backtrack just a titch. Before the Kessel Run, there is the Sabacc game with Lando.
Yes.
And that's connected through. There's the what's the Crimson? What were they? What were they called? Do you remember? The organization. Okay. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, the Crimson Dawn.
Yeah. So the Crimson Dawn, Beckett works for, and he gets wrapped up with them, right? And then Kira is kind of shoved off to with these guys to say, okay, make sure this works because they failed the first time.
Right, because you find out that Kira is actually a lieutenant in the Crimson Dawn.
Right. So she has to go on this mission with them. I know a guy. So that leads into Lando. Then there's the Sabacc game where he tries to, and he plays it so well.
Oh, he
He's
does.
like, oh, I have this badass ship, blah, blah. It piques his interest, and Lando obviously cheats in order to win.
Yes.
And takes all his money. So he loses, yet they get thrust into this adventure anyway.
Yes.
The Kessel Run, though, I love that there was, who said the line? Was it Lando that said, no one's ever done the Kessel Run in less than 20 parsecs?
Everybody knows you can't do it in less than 20.
Right. And so the Han that we know, he's like, well, I just take that as a challenge.
Oh, exactly.
Right? He's like, well, we can do it, but we have to cheat.
Yes.
Not cheat, but we have to take a shortcut.
Yes.
Right? But I'm so glad they did. I feel like they really did the Kessel Run well. I'm glad it wasn't all about the monster. I'm glad
Although the monster was cool.
The monster was cool. I'm glad the singularity, having that black hole in there, I thought that was just this is the geek part of me, or the part of me that loves astrophysics. I feel like they did a good job of making space, although there was still sound in space. I feel like they did the space stuff well. There was the maelstrom with the black hole, the planets colliding.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm actually curious to see what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say.
I actually can't wait. I'm going to tune into that one because they actually, although hyperspace and all that stuff was still there, they're jumping through this stuff. But I feel like it was grounded in more of they spent a lot of time in space.
Yes.
And I feel like if they're going to do that and make a Kessel Run that's in space, it should be grounded in some sort of reality, although it's space fantasy.
No, absolutely. I totally get you.
So that was cool.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah, so we have that. We saw the quintessential moment when Han gets his pistol, his blaster. Sorry.
And I thought that was nice.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't really like. It was just like. Here.
Well, it was a very subtle take on the moment in the hero's journey where they get a talisman from the mentor. It's like, here is the weapon. Here's the thing.
Right.
This will aid you on your journey. He kisses it, throws it to him.
Yeah, the fact that Beckett kissed it too shows how important it was.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Kind of reminded me in SWTOR of Sparky with Corso Rick.
Yeah, totally. So we got the Kessel Run.
Yep.
And then what else we got?
Well, those are the big things that everyone was like kind of expecting. Now, the little things that we know are directly connected, but we weren't really expecting. Seeing Warwick Davis.
Yep.
And the fact that last week it was confirmed that his character, he's part of the Marauders. And the fact that the character he's playing is confirmed to be the same role he played in Phantom Menace when he was cheering on the
that's awesome.
pod races on Tatooine.
I love that. I love that connection. The other thing we should probably talk about now before we forget, the relationship with Chewie.
Yes.
How he meets Chewie, how it's interesting, and I feel like they did subtly. What I always thought was really interesting about the original trilogy is Han is one of the only ones that not only understands Chewie, and he's friends with him, but part of it is he speaks his language.
Well, in the original trilogy, he understood the language.
Right.
Here we find out he can actually speak it.
Right.
Part of it.
But he actually, and then so we realize why later he doesn't actually have to speak it is because Chewie obviously understands, basic,
yeah.
But I just thought that was interesting. So
I do like how they did do a nod to the Legends, the EU, because originally the way they met was he broke him out of a Kessel mine, the Kessel slaves.
Spice Mines of Kessel.
Right, as a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here they met earlier, but he still was able to do the breakout with the Wookiees on Kessel. And
they freed Wookiees on Kessel among other slaves as well, which I thought was cool.
Exactly. And if you notice, there was a conversation between Chewbacca and another Wookiee, because the Wookiees were taking off, and he was like, "Are you coming with us?" And he goes, "No, I'm going this way.
I'm going this way."
It doesn't actually say it, but you know that's where Chewie decides to give him the life debt.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the thing is I don't think what we had in the EU wasn't necessarily because he saved Chewie's life. It's because he saved the Wookiees' lives.
Yeah. And and I'm glad they didn't say there was no mention of life debt. There was just this understanding between friends. And I think what it really came down to at the very end, or towards the end of the film, where Chewie puts his hand on his shoulder when he's watching Kira go, it speaks volumes. It's one, I understand what you're going through. Two, we're friends, and 3, we'll get through this. You know? What
Yeah,
I mean?
and that's not the only time that Han responded to that, because when they were just about to go into the maelstrom, Kira does the same thing, puts her hand on his back, and that's where he gets the confidence to go into it.
And Han has always been one of those people. He's stronger when he's
Supported.
When he's supported, and I like that. We didn't talk about this. How his name was chosen. It wasn't him. I thought that was interesting.
I loved it. It was very much like the Ellis Island journey.
Yeah.
For those of you who know Godfather at all, when Vito Corleone comes from Sicily to New York, he's actually from the town of Corleone in Sicily. And so the person reads his name badge. It says Vito de Corleone, Vito of Corleone,
Right.
as Vito Corleone, and that's how he gets his last name.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And so it's very similar the same way as when he's joining the Imperial Navy. He says his name is Han, and he goes, "Well, what's your family's name?" He goes, "I have no family."
Right.
And he knows what his last name
Yeah.
is.
He knows he has a last name, but he says, "I have no family. I'm by myself.
I don't want to identify that.
Yeah.
And so the guy says Solo.
He's all right. You're Solo. Here we go. And
Yeah.
I just thought that was really cool. And he owns it. And he is solo. He is alone. He feels like that within him, but without the people around him, he's nothing.
Exactly.
And I think that's what, I honestly think that it would be interesting to rewatch the earlier films after seeing this. Only in that especially with Force Awakens, especially with the Force Awakens, I feel like that moment towards the end between the two of them would mean a lot. Not a lot more, because it meant a lot, but there's more backstory there that we kind of thought about, but now that we've seen it, like watching them part, and that detonator scene chokes me up every time.
Yeah.
He's like, what does he say? He gives it to him and he says, "You hold this," or something. Like it's just like almost a throwaway line, but it's like, that's the last time he's going to talk to his friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I got off on a tangent, but I love the relationship. I love that how they met. Yeah, I just the two friendships, I feel like they did a good job. They did a good job with Chewie, and they did a great job with Lando.
Yeah, exactly. They played those perfectly. Now the last, I mean, this is definitely a heavy spoiler, but the last big part that connects to the main universe. Let's talk about Maul.
Yeah. So, to back up just a little bit, there's a heist of sorts. They're trying to get the I don't remember what it's called, coaxium. They're trying to get that refined. Then the Marauder,
hyperspace fuel.
Yeah, the Marauders show up. The Marauders aren't what we think, which was a cool twist.
Turns out they're the spark of the rebellion.
They're the beginning of the rebellion. So that was a pretty cool little nod to later films. So we get that, and then basically all attention is put back to the Crimson Tide, or Crimson. I keep saying
Crimson Dawn.
Crimson Dawn. So they're waiting for them to show up. They know there's going to be an interaction, and they're making their plans, right?
Right.
I like how that played out. We kind of talked about it earlier, but on the back end of it, once it's all said and done, once Han and them get away with the caper, right? Kira basically says go.
Right, because we find out throughout the movie, I mean, it really heavy hands it a couple of times, that
our feed is fucked, by the way. I don't know. It's dropping in and out. There's all kinds of shit going on, but continue.
That sucks. That the Paul Bettany character isn't really, I mean, he's the big bad, but he has a boss too.
Yeah. And they've alluded to, and we should have picked up on it earlier, the fact that it's called Crimson makes sense. But
yes.
So that continues. He has a boss. She ends up killing her boss. Right. And there's that moment, and Star Wars movies, I feel like, do this really well. She, in my head, turned to the dark side then. She said, I'm taking this upon myself. I've let go of my past. Solo's gone. He'll be fine. Now I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to take over for the guy who oppressed me. Let me see who the boss is, and it turns out it's Maul.
Yeah, well, I think she knew who. I think
you
she
think
knew.
so?
I do.
I don't know if she knew, but anyway.
I think so.
Okay.
but it plays on multiple levels because we already know that Maul has another person he's reporting to.
Right. So, and then obviously that alludes to the fact that the Empire is behind a lot more than we think.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Maul, the having Maul there sitting there like, oh, now I really feel like I'm glad he didn't say the word apprentice, but I feel like it was heavily implied. We're gonna be working together closely from now on.
And the fact that he called her to Dathomir.
Yeah, and I think in some of the EU and all this other stuff going on, it's implied that Sith always have secret apprentices, and I like to think that Kira is his secret apprentice.
Yeah, well, when they're invading the spice mine and she kills the director,
right?
You know she's been trained.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think she was trained by Voss because he was much more of a face of the organization.
Right.
I think she's secretly been being trained by Maul.
I love it. And so, if what we talked about last week makes sense or is a thing, it seems like we're gonna have more movies in this.
Yeah, it seems like this is
with
going to be a trilogy.
These people,
yes.
You know, which I love.
Oh, absolutely!
You know?
I think it totally played it great.
Yeah, totally. All right, so what else do we want to talk about?
A couple things that we think might be connected, but they never really came out and said. The leader of the Marauders, I think, might be Sana.
Yeah,
from the comic. It's a different name in this one. Her name is Inverse Nest, which also is a nice subtle hint to Nest is the birth of the rebellion. It's where it's being birthed. You know, so it's the same sort of thing. I like that. So yeah, so little things like that.
Yeah, I'd like to see what happens with that crew. I bet they're affiliated with the crew of the Ghost. There's gonna be some connection there.
I would think that they're another cell.
Exactly. So I like that. And again, I like that we didn't have to know this story, but the fact that we do know it broadens what we see later.
Right.
With the rebellion, the animated stuff, and everything else. What else did I like? The music. There was one cue there which I loved. Where you get when they're going on the Kessel Run, and I told you this during the film.
Right, you hear the Asteroid Belt theme.
Yeah, the Asteroid Belt theme from Empire was played, and I thought that was perfect.
Yeah, and you hear when you saw the Star Destroyer, you heard the Empire theme, which was great when they were doing the blockade.
And that was a cool ass shot.
Oh, very cool shot.
The Star Destroyer, like just half of it in the Maelstrom. You know, that was cool.
That was really cool. And then you heard the main Star Wars theme when they finally escaped the Maw, and so there's a couple different points. But what I liked is that the music John Powell, who did it, who also took over for John Williams in the Harry Potter series.
Oh, really?
He did later Harry Potter scores. He had a very heavy. I mean, Williams has a very heavy classical influence, anyways.
Yeah.
But Powell took it to another level. A lot of, especially the credits closing at the end credits, very classical.
There was one moment where there was a choir. Is that the way to
right? Yeah.
A vocal group.
Yeah, a choir.
At some point, which I thought was a nice touch as well.
Yeah, in honestly, when did that come out?
I'm trying to remember.
It wasn't when Maul came out, was it? Because the only other time we've ever had a choir in the Star Wars universe was during the Duel of the Fates.
It was when the Marauders showed up on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there was that high-pitched kind of singing.
Well, what was great about that is you find out later in the scene that the people who were actually on the beach, not the Marauders, but the locals, had their tongues ripped out.
That was so cool. That was, and when she's telling that story, and then the camera's panning around, and there was that eerie moment before the Marauders showed up where they're walking. They said, "Oh, we got to go up here." They're walking up there, and nobody's speaking.
Exactly.
Nobody is saying a thing, and you don't think about it until she starts telling that story. It's like, oh, none of these people have tongues, you know. Yeah. And so that was that story. And then I did like the reveal where she tells that story, and she says, "Look, all of us, everybody in our group has lost something." And it's very much like the Ghost. And the rebels, you know what I mean? They all come from something. They all have some reason that they want to rebel.
Exactly. I honestly think that they are another cell.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. What else do you want to talk about, dude?
I loved it. It just overall, I thought it was a great film. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I definitely want to watch it again. There's definitely a lot of little subtle cues.
for sure.
One thing I didn't mention, and you didn't catch this either, at the end when Kira's talking to Maul, she brings down the shade, so it gets really dark in the room, and it does a pan, and in the background you see a silhouette of a Mandalorian armor, but it's not Mandalorian. It looks like Boba Fett.
Yeah,
It's got the thing coming out of the helmet and everything, and I'm like, okay, well, is that just a set of armor, or is it? That would be cool if Boba Fett was actually in the background just waiting to serve.
in the background with Maul.
No,
with her.
He was on the ship.
Okay, no, I did. Okay, I did see that, and I didn't read it as Mandalorian armor. I actually thought it was a person standing back there.
Yeah, it might be Boba Fett.
Right, and so I do remember that. Oh,
They actually referenced Bosk earlier too.
they did. The Bosk thing was cool. We both looked at each other like Bosk. Yeah. So there's okay. Now that I'm thinking of that scene differently now. I did see that back there, and it was almost. Yeah, it was silhouetted in a way. It was hard to tell if it was, but she was alone in that room. I felt like, you know what I mean. So I don't know, but we also don't know. Again, this is that yacht. We don't know what suits of armor he has sitting around,
Exactly.
that kind of thing. So
I mean, obviously by the blades that he's using, he's definitely a collector.
yeah, that yacht was cool too.
Yeah,
It was like
huge.
straight vertical though. I thought that was
Yep.
badass. That was cool. All right, man. Well, I'm just trying to think of anything else we need to bring up. I think we covered most of
We
it.
did. I thought just overall very enjoyable. I definitely can't wait to see it again.
Yeah, the other thing we didn't really talk about was the first crew, but we don't really have to because again, part of this journey was losing people.
Right. Well, Jon Favreau is
yeah.
fantastic. He played the original four-armed pilot.
Yeah, that was cool.
And he was great. Very funny sense of humor.
Yeah.
He was great. And,
And then
then Sandy Newton.
And then the girl,
Tandy
and then
Newton was just awesome.
right, she was good. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think.
First of all, how about the relationship between Lando and Leet?
Yeah, that was a trip. What I liked about it was clearly there was more there than even the droid was saying. Like, there's that moment where the droid's talking to Kira, and it's like, well, you could tell he likes me, but you know,
and you really find it, and you're thinking that the droid is definitely reading something.
Yeah,
but then you find out Lando really has feelings for the droid.
But also, Kira makes this comment. She's like, "How would that work?" She's like, "It works," and it's like, oh, so they've had something already, and they both have feelings, but neither of them are acknowledging it.
Right.
And I thought that was cool. And that scene where she gets hit, where Leet gets hit,
and he just won't give up on
and
her.
he is bringing her out. He gets hit. I mean, it was a really cool moment. And then everybody basically, you know, eventually Chewie gets in there and hauls them both out.
Yeah, and then ultimately when her processor gets put into the ship, and her soul gets put into the ship.
And I thought that was a nice touch. He's like, you know, she's part of the
she's
ship
part
now.
of the ship now, and that was
cool.
perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place.
And
to
now
end
you
it.
understand why Lando has such a connection to the ship.
Oh, for sure. All right,
I think it's it.
that's a good place to end it, dude. So, thanks for tuning in to The Usual Podcast. If you have comments or questions, you can find us at theusualpodcast.com. Email us at theusualpodcast@gmail.com. And we're on Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. I'm at Darth Pops on Twitter, and Will is at IMO Griggs. Find us on your favorite podcatchers. Support the show, teespring.com/store/theusualpodcast to get your gear. And we also have audibletry.com/usualpodcast. And the best way to support the show monetarily is patreon.com/usualpodcast. We have a lot of content up there. We have tiers. You can give us a little bit. You can give us a lot. Become an official drinking buddy, however you want to do it. And support your favorite geeks.
We're their favorite geeks.
I'd like to think so.
We like to think so, yes.
Anything else, my friend?
No, just make sure, as always, have a fun.
Yeah. All right. Have a fun. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.
I don't know what was going on with the feed, dude. That shit was all over the place. I've had 180 drop frames, which isn't bad, but usually I have 0. And like this thing came in and out. Kid Lee brought some people in, then they all were gone, and I don't know. The whole thing was a mess. Anyway. But that is that. Well, thanks, dude. I'm glad we got that out.
Yeah, good show.
And then, yeah. What are we doing? All right.
I'm tired.
Me too. You got stuff to do still tonight, of course. You have anything else you need to do on here?
Nope, I'm done. So I was trying to get it done really quick at the beginning so I can get out of your guys' hair.
No, you're fine. I haven't been able to talk to Kate about this stuff yet. And should be interesting. See how it goes.
Excuse me.
Oops. Once again, I almost forgot.